be annotating this book while I'm reading it. And in two twists, tore the head from the thick neck with a savage howl. I am kind of in the mood to read a classic, so I think that means it is time to finally pick up The Master and Margarita. This will be perfect for me to read right now because I think there's an element of fantasy to it, and so that is just perfect for the mood that I'm in. Let's cut to Jack, all done up in hair and makeup, who told you about this book in her classics recommendation and TBR video. This one has really captivated me by the description alone. It seems really creative. One hot spring, the devil arrives in Moscow, accompanied by a retinue that includes a beautiful naked witch and an immense talking black cat with a fondness for chess and vodka. The visitors quickly wreak havoc in a city that refuses to believe in either God or Satan, but they also bring peace to two unhappy Muscovites. One is the Master, a writer pilloried for daring to write a novel about Christ and Pontius Pilate. The other is Margarita, who loves the Master so deeply that she is willing literally to go to hell for him. What ensues is a novel of inexhaustible energy, humor, and philosophical depth. That awesome summary is exactly why I am super excited to check out this book. So in this video, I wanted to do a vlog so I can share my experience with you. I am hoping that in this video, I will capture an entire experience reading a fantastic book and recommend it for those who like classics and fantasy, because going into it, that is what I'm expecting. So I hope it is everything I'm expecting and more. And if you like books from a wide variety of genres and the bookish lifestyle, such as what I'm going to be showing in this reading vlog, then please go ahead and subscribe, because those are exactly the types of videos that I create. And if you are a bookworm who loves classic literature, then go ahead and hit that like button down below, because I am really curious how many of us there are out there. I am going to be annotating this book while I'm reading it. So right now I'm kind of doing my initial research to see the types of things that I want to annotate in this book. Typically, I mark moments in pink that I love, and orange are quotes that I like, so I'll probably stick with that. Green I typically do when a new character is introduced, so maybe I'll go that direction. For the other ones though, that's where it gets a little creative. Right now I'm doing my initial research on the book to see the different types of themes and symbolism that I can expect in my read. I couldn't find The Master and Margarita on SparkNotes, which is my preferred website when I'm doing this type of research. I did find a website called litcharts.com that has similar information though, so that's what I'm pulling this from. It says that in The Master and Margarita, I can expect themes of courage and cowardice, art and authenticity, the ambiguity of good and evil, love and hope, and the danger and absurdity of Soviet society. It also has a section for symbols, so I think these are some of the things I'm going to be keeping an eye out on. Wolin's Black Poodle Walking Stick, the moon and moonlight. Moonlight is a complex symbol that takes on different meanings throughout the novel. It often depicts moments of transition. Briefcases. Many of the minor characters in the Moscow narrative, who usually represent cowardice or selfishness, are depicted with briefcases. Interesting. Horses. Equestrian imagery crops up intermittently throughout the book, and like moonlight, horses do not represent one thing at all times. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll want to annotate some of the symbols. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more research, but then I'm going to go ahead and crack open this book and get started. hit page 100, which is chapter 10, and I'm about 22% of the way into the book. My initial impressions are that it's pretty chaotic. I'm very happy that I was warned because I had the right expectations going into this, that you're not supposed to understand what's going on at first. And I think a large portion of that is due to the fact that the author is known for not identifying the characters until later. And that, paired with the fact that Woland, or the devil, has several different identities, makes it a little bit confusing. And there's a lot of characters. Each chapter we seem to meet a new character, and then we see how Woland interacts with them as he is establishing himself in Moscow. He kind of plays mind games with them, twists their reality, rewrites history, completely changes things so they think they're going crazy. And so each chapter seems to be focused on a different character, so it gets a little bit confusing. It is super entertaining. There are elements of the supernatural and Woland's powers, and there is some dark humor, which I am cracking up about, and there's a couple like gruesome descriptions, which really surprises me for the time period in which this was written. It's pretty fun. Most of my tabs so far are to keep track of all these characters I mentioned, and there's not too many tabs for everything else, or as much as I was expecting. I think the theme of the absurdity of the Soviet society, the good versus evil, or mostly the element of evil, kind of the inauthenticity of art, those are all themes that are so powerful that it's kind of, I would be tabbing like every page, but there's a lot of that. There's also an introduction of the 7 deadly sins, I think. I'm wondering if that's going to continue. I really hope so, because I like that element. There's been some occurrences of the briefcase symbol, and in one example, this one was linked to a character that was brought down by greed. So that was really cool, and that's kind of what makes me think, I wonder if there's going to be other elements of the 7 deadly sins. I'm really happy that I'm reading this alongside lit notes to truly absorb what I'm reading. It said that the common pattern of Woland's schemes is to appeal to the worst characteristics in people and then expose them for all to see. And I love that in books. I love exposing the worst in people. It's almost like the devil is doing good. Is that right? That can't be right, right? The supernatural elements are increasing with every page, and I love kind of the subtlety of some of it. So there's one section where they talk about people mysteriously disappearing, and you're kind of led to believe that this is due to Woland being in town, but really this is a subtle dig at the Stalin regime, where the secret police would come and take people, and they'd take them away to camps or something if they weren't properly following the Soviet rules. So that's really how this book gets a little controversial, is all the different kind of references to Soviet society. I'm really glad that I'm reading this alongside lit notes. That's another thing that really helps me understand what the author intends here. Because the book starts out a little bit chaotic, it's taken me a little while to get into it. I started it and then I went to Napa, so I took a break from this and focused on some murder mysteries and some other things. But now I am super stoked to pick this back up again and see what happens. The dogs are absolutely running amok right now, so if you hear ruckus, that's them. See what I mean? Telling you, so difficult right now. Chapter 12 was exquisite and my favorite chapter so far. So the devil had his magic show, and so a lot of supernatural fantasy stuff, as you can imagine. Really, really cool. I think I'm onto something with the 7 deadly sins, because not only did we have an exhibition of greed, but we also had one for pride. So I'm definitely thinking that we'll see more of that. It also appears to be a fatal flaw when someone is trying to rationalize magic or the devil or God. That seems to be their downfall here, and maybe a sign of the cowardice that I was talking about earlier with the themes and symbolism. And there's one event in the magic show that was so gruesome, so hilarious, so dark. But in a nutshell, and it's not too much of a spoiler, I don't think it's a major plot thing, but someone angers Woland, right? and the crowd was really into the show, so they're not too happy with this person, and so they call for him to tear off his head. So that's what's gonna be done, and he calls for the giant black cat to do it. Growling, the cat sank his plump paws into the skimpy chevalier of the master of ceremonies, and in 2 twists tore the head from the thick neck with a savage howl. Blood spurted in fountains from the torn neck arteries and poured over the shirt front and tailcoat. The headless body paddled its feet somehow absurdly and sat down on the floor. The head cried desperately for all of the theater to hear, "A doctor!" So it didn't kill him. His head is just removed from his body, and he's like talking to the audience. I just finished book 1, which means I'm about 50% of the way through the book, and it is still going much the same way, and that is chaos is reigning supreme. In just about every chapter, we have a new character, and even though they are somewhat related to other characters or events in the book, it is still a lot of characters to keep track of. And Wolin and his gang are interacting with all these folks, and chaos and mischief ensues. A lot of these new characters are ending up in the loony bin, which is awesome because that's where we met one of our title characters, the Master. We learned that he was writing a novel, and he was living with the love of his life writing this novel, but was having a really tough time with editors and publishers. As you can imagine, in Soviet society, they really control art in all forms, performance or writing, poetry, and it wasn't really well received. So the Master took that really hard, and needless to say, he's in the loony bin, and Margarita, his love, doesn't know where he is, and he doesn't want her to know. That's kind of crappy. All the magical schemes make this really entertaining, but it's really hard to grasp the plot. We know that the devil is in Moscow because he wants to know more about the people of Moscow and kind of unveil their true values, I suppose. And so you kind of get that, but the overall plot I think will probably take place in book 2 because, like I said, we did just meet the Master. We have not been introduced to Margarita yet, but the next chapter is called Margarita, so I think we will learn more about her. So the plot may come together there. Right now, like I said, it's just kind of entertaining. It kind of makes me think of like a bunch of short stories, and it reminds me a lot of the nonsense in Alice in Wonderland, right? Where things are entertaining and fun, but they don't make sense, but you're just enjoying the ride. Lit charts has been crucial for this reading experience. I really don't know if I could understand half of this on my own. So it's been really beneficial. And closing out book 1, it says, Wolin and his gang enjoy nonsense. In fact, it is one of their tactics. They create events that seem impossible to believe, making it difficult for their victims' accounts to be believed. The narrative tone varies a lot throughout the book. This is one of the rare instances when the narrator directly addresses the reader. Here, heralding the end of book 1, indicating that something is fundamentally different about book 2. As Margarita is about to make her appearance, perhaps this is an indication that her character has something that the Moscow people in book 1 lack. Courage. I am really excited to get acquainted with Margarita. right, I did it. I finally finished the Master and Margarita last night, and while I'm still kind of absorbing what I just read, now I can better articulate my thoughts on it and a little bit more of the plot, because now I'm confident I won't spoil anything for you. There are three main storylines in this book. Firstly, the one I was talking about, the devil coming to Moscow, really investigating the true values that the people of Moscow hold dear and important. Secondly, there's the story of the lovers, the Master and Margarita. The Master is a novelist struggling because his art is not appreciated, and Margarita is the woman who devotedly loves him, cheers him on, takes care of him, very selfless character. Then you have the story of Pontius Pilate, who presided over the trial and ultimate crucifixion of Jesus. And this is told both in flashbacks, but also it has an element of a book within a book, because that is the story that the Master wrote, and it's also something that the devil is telling a story of. Okay, so firstly, my whole theory on the 7 deadly sins did not pan out as I was expecting. Of course, there was greed, there was pride, there was, lust, because there was an element of someone being exposed for having a mistress, but that wasn't the main structure that I was anticipating it might be. I talked a lot about chaos and nonsense, but I want to give you a better idea of what I mean now that I've absorbed it a little bit. And again, I know it's not a spoiler, but there were vampires. There were witches flying on broomsticks. There was a man who was turned into a flying pig carrying a briefcase. A surprising amount of decapitations. And someone getting beaten up with a roast chicken. So I think you can see what I mean, that it was very entertaining, but very nonsensical at times. And when I talked about how each chapter is like a different character and a different short story, you can kind of see how we go between all these elements, and it could be a little bit confusing. And also, if you're not used to Russian literature or translations from Russian, each character has a very confusing name. Most of these names I don't think I could pronounce, but then there's different versions of that name, and so they call characters by like 3 to 4 different titles, and so you don't always know who they're talking about. And that's another reason why I love having lit notes or like a spark notes to accompany my reads, especially for Russian literature. I talked about a lot of themes of this book, and I think the major one would probably be good and evil, and the element of good cannot exist without evil. Rainbows only exist because of a storm, right? So the devil isn't that evil, if that makes sense. Like, it's strange because he has so much empathy for the Master and Margarita because of her devotion, their selflessness. They're not materialistic. And he kind of helps them out or wants to. She really is the character, the shining light in all of Moscow. Everyone else who is out for themselves, very greedy, very one-track mind, very focused on the ridiculous bureaucracy of Moscow and appearances. She's very selfless, very confident, very selfless, very courageous. And I think that's why the devil likes her. There's actually a good amount of respect between the light side and the dark side, and evil and good, and they respect each other. It's not like a battle. They're not on opposite sides of morality. And so that was a really cool thing to read about. Book 2 definitely brought things together a lot more, and there was a much more coherent plot rather than that like short story vibe I was talking about in book 1. So book 2 was mostly about Margarita and her relationship with the devil and his retinue, which is kind of like a gang, like his gang of associates, right? And all the mayhem they cause and all their schemes. Hilarious. But book 2 is about her and her journey to get back to her love, and then when they're reunited and how that all goes, because he's in the loony bin. He's not doing too good, right? Then you also see all the side characters that were impacted by the schemes, and if they learned anything or not by their experience and their brush with the devil. There's a lot of commentary on the Soviet society, and I definitely wouldn't have understood it because it wasn't in your face, blatantly described. It was a lot more subtle, at least for me, because I'm not experienced with this. So I'm so glad that I had lit notes. I'm going to go ahead and link down below lit notes what I used, because if you're going to read this book and if you want to get the most out of it, because it is very complex. It's not just surface level plot. There's a lot of hidden meanings. And when it comes to Soviet society, it had to be hidden because art was so heavily regulated. So this book didn't even come out like when it was written. I think it took 30 years from when it was written to when it finally could be published. I know I was watching a video, like a TED Talk, and when it was first published, it was like an abridged version because everything was so monitored. So if you want to get the most out of it in terms of why it was so controversial, why it was edited, I definitely recommend some supporting literature like that to like read alongside it, because I found that commentary very interesting. I definitely learned a lot, and I think that's kind of the stuff I'm still grasping and trying to get hold of. In the end, I really liked The Master and Margarita. It took a lot of brain power. It took me a very long time to read it because I did really have to read a chapter and then look at an analysis to see what I just read, the symbolism, the meaning, and all that. So it took a really long time, a lot of brain power. It was very chaotic, like I said, so I found it very entertaining, but had a hard time coming up with a coherent theme throughout the book. But probably should have taken the pressure off because that didn't show up until part 2. I think honestly it was probably 75% of the way through before the 3 storylines finally came together. So if you're reading this and you feel like what's the point of everything, specifically these 3 storylines, don't worry, because they all come together and they all play a part, and you'll see that in the end. So that was pretty satisfying. So I liked it. I can't say I love it. I can't say it's my favorite classic. It was entertaining. I think if you like fantasy, if you like Alice in Wonderland, I think that you'll like the plot of this book. I think if you have an interest in Russian history, this would be good, especially Russian history if you want to stay away from wars, because, you know, I think of War and Peace. That's like the Russian book I think of. This doesn't have war or violence or anything. It's just entertaining. It's kind of comical. So it's very unique. It's very unique for a classic. So if those things appeal to you, then I definitely recommend it if you have the brain power and if you can keep track of all the Russian names, because that was tough for me. I hope you enjoyed this reading vlog, and if you're still watching, drop a comment down below if there is a classic you want me to read and do a reading vlog similar to this on, because I'm in the mood for another classic. This didn't quite satisfy the craving I have for a classic, so I think I'm ready for a little bit more. So please drop a comment down below of a favorite you have, or one that you've been wanting to check out but maybe a little bit intimidated by. I would love to know. And thank you so much again for watching. I will see you in the next video.